the AI Kubernetes Show.
Hello and welcome to the AI Kubernetes Show. My name is William Chia. I am your host, coming to you live from KubeCon in Atlanta. For this episode, I'm very excited to have with me Chris Khanoyan, who is a tech lead and a senior data scientist at Booz Allen. Chris, welcome to the show.
Booz-Allen. Thank you.
One of the things that I have been excited about with this series is talking to different people with different perspectives. Some are software engineers, some are CEOs. For you as a data scientist, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts in general about AI and what you see happening, if you could enlighten us from a data science perspective.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for welcoming me to this podcast. And I'm really happy to talk to you about data science and what we're seeing in the past from data science and what's to be coming in the next 2, 3, 5 years. Honestly, even in the next 6 months, because AI is changing so quickly. I mean, it could be a surprise what's going to happen in the next 3 months and the capabilities that happen then. So as a data scientist, sometimes there's a lot of overlap with different engineering, with the data science, and you're transforming that data for AI or for machine learning. So when you look at AI today, based on how fast the technology is changing, I think that's where we're thinking about how people are using AI today. You know, the auto-generated AI for creating code from the AI side of code. People can do that. Anybody who's not even tech savvy can make code through AI. But it's important to know the foundation. And what does that mean? If a bug were to appear in your code, what does that mean? And how do you look for it? And where do you find that? Also, with a data scientist and a data engineer, there's, you have to figure out what the data pipeline is and the different sources of that data and the different systems and where those sources are coming from. And of course, there's different formats of that sources. And even the data itself is not always clean. And so once you're getting that data, you're getting it from that pipeline. And sometimes you have to create a data pipeline code, which is coming from AI. But you have to think about that as a way to control the governance of that data itself. And that's the support. And it's not just for myself, but for anybody else who's going to be using that particular data set that we are maintaining. So in the next 6 months, 7 months, 10 months, we're learning more about how to govern and how to manage and how to protect that data. And what are those risks involved with that? Let me stop now to see if you have anything to add.
This is very interesting to me in several ways and keys on several themes that I've heard when I talk to folks in my community or here on the show. So one of the key themes with the LLM style of AI is the idea of the data it's trained on, but more critically for everyone else, the data that you feed in as context. And so as a data scientist thinking about clean data, this is a challenge for everybody. Where do we start in terms of getting the data clean so that it can serve as good context, into our AI agentic input? Where do we start here in terms of getting the data ready for AI?
That's a good question. It's a challenge. When you're talking about the data itself, you don't always get clean data. But it depends, like you said, where the data comes from, who owns the data set. And if you're using a particular data set that's coming from AI, you have to figure out where did that data set originate from and who is responsible for that AI data set. And then prior to cleaning a particular data set, we have to determine how much data we're needed. And if you're coming from an LLM, we just have to build it on a foundational model. And then we have to fine tune it little by little until we meet what the expectations are for that. But if we have to do something else like machine learning, then you have a data set with, credit card information or other information, which could be billion resources of credit card information. And only 1% of that is probably fraudulent. And we have to determine how much of that data set we're going to identify. And then you have the different columns that we have to figure out what are significant and what aren't significant. And you don't necessarily need the entire data set that you're having to use for that particular training. And you have to select what is significant give to AI to use for foreseeable necessity. And then again, false credit card information can then apply to other things. And you've got the ServiceNow tickets that come into, you've got the predictability of who is going to be using that. Who's going to be predicting that for upcoming basketball, for the NCAA? You're using that information if you're using predicting basketball points. So there are so many different points of data set. So you have to figure out what you're going to use it for. It's not a straightforward plan. You have context A, B, C, all the different scenarios that you're going to have in there. And you have to create a model that meets the need for each of those sets. And sometimes you go wrong. Sometimes you don't get the perfect set for what the evaluation is that you're wanting to do. Evaluating an LLM and a data set is one thing, but you really have to make sure you know what you've got, what you're using it for, and also what cost you're willing to spend in order to get the set to where you're using it at and where it's usable. Depends on what the budget is for the organization that's cleaning this set. Data is the core part for AI. I mean, that's what the whole world is. And everything starts with where is the data coming from and what are you going to use it for and how do you fix it to get to where you need it?
This is a recurring theme that I've pointed out with the technical guests on the show, folks like yourself, folks that are software engineers. They have said over and over again, begin with the end in mind. Think about what you want to accomplish and then design towards that. And this is not what we hear from CEOs on the news, or even what I hear from folks in my network where they say, leadership has just said, you have to use AI with no guidance whatsoever. From your perspective.
Exactly, yeah.
How do you think we can reconcile these two different mindsets? Or, what do we need to do as technical practitioners to maybe try to influence other people to, have a more reasonable mindset?
Oh. Okay.
I gave you the easy.
Yeah, right. Easy, hard. Okay. Fortunately, I've had an opportunity to work with many different clients, non-technical clients as well as technical clients. But most of the time, the clients that I work with are not technical. They don't have that technical experience, but they want these ultimate goals, A, B, and C goals, but they don't really understand what it takes to clean the data to get to the set that they're looking for. And sometimes we can't even get to what they're looking for. I would say that within the federal government or in different spaces, there are agreements or at least some sort of situations that we're like, we can't access this system, we can't access that system of data. And so we have to have an agreement that says, look, if you want us to do these certain things with different data, with different organizations, you have to give us access to different sets. And so that's a whole nother issue that we're working with clients. It's not easy to get to the data that we need to do what we're being asked. So whether it comes from machine learning, AI, or from an actual data set, we have to navigate through the customer and to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to where we're going with this set. I think it's an important question, not just for myself, but for everybody else and who we're working with, whether it's the CEO or the client, or that is whether they have a technical expertise or not. They need to make sure that they have an agreement and an understanding of what the technical needs are for these goals and each aspect of the goals. And therefore, they have to be willing to make these agreements with the people that have that knowledge, that ability to access things, to give us the access to accomplish these little steps every day that we need to, that will get us to the ultimate final big goal that they're looking for.
Definitely a complex scenario. And you mentioned not just for yourself, but for everyone to think about. So in some cases, you have a problem, as you're describing, where the data probably exists, but you just need access to it. And that could be
Absolutely.
Relational blocker or relationship or political, and sometimes it's a technical challenge to block that. However, in some cases, there is a lack of data. There's not enough critical mass of data in order to accomplish whatever you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
In those scenarios, right, how do you approach that? Do you say like it can't be done, or are there ways to work around the lack of data?
So if you notice that I have some bald spots here on my beard, that's caused from the stress of looking for the lack of data that I'm trying to find. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what it is. Actually, when it's impossible to get certain amounts of data, there's always workarounds, but it's not ideal. Sometimes you have to have many different methods. You have to boost many different data sets to get what you're looking for. Some systems are on-prem and some systems are in the cloud. So what we have to do is gather everything into one centric location, into a repository, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, using the different pipelines to get them all into one place, which honestly is a pain in the ass. So putting all of that together, it's not realistic. It's not ideal to do this on a regular basis. Sometimes it's very straightforward and it's easy. We get what we need. So we do have workarounds to get what we need in place, and it works. And that's how I have to make it work for me in my organization.
Are you able to just think about a recent example or one that you can talk about where there was a lack of data for any reason, but you needed to use a workaround? Can you describe the workaround, maybe for somebody like me that understands software engineering, but not as much data science?
I wish I could answer that question for you. Unfortunately, I can only do at a high level. You just have to work with the data pipeline. Sometimes, if you're talking about Google Cloud, uses PubSub and data flow. And that's a very common, ideal situation for data management. But that data pipeline development is a little bit different, not ideal. I'd love to tell you more, but I'm not at liberty.
That is completely fair. Another question I will ask is, in terms of accessibility, we live in a world where different people are more welcome into some spaces than others, whether that is intentional or unintentional. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, are you seeing any use cases or ways in which AI is helping to increase accessibility for any group of people, or specifically for deaf people?
I can think of two different things. And that's a good question that you're asking. From my perspective as a deaf person, I am exhausted from meeting after meeting and reading captionings, looking at interpreters. And it's just the nature of getting exhausted. It takes a lot of mental work having to do that. So with AI assistant, um, AI providing their AI opinion, what is the best way to do things, A, B, C scenarios, that helps me to quickly go through and increase my productivity about how different scenarios might play out. With AI today, also, if you know about the company called Meta,
Mhm.
they own Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure you've heard of the company. Recently, they released a new product that with a partnership with Ray-Ban. The glasses, they have those AI powered glasses that have live caption in them.
Okay.
And I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is great. I have these captions. I can work with a meeting and I don't have to look at a transcript or look at the captions. Because when you look at the captions, you can't work on something else because you're stuck looking at a particular screen where those captions are. But if I have this on my glasses, I can be doing something else and see the captions there. Or I could go to, you as a hearing person, you could go to the bathroom and put the sound on and still listen to something, walk away, get a cup of coffee, etc. I don't have the ability to do that. So it's exhausting having to just sit and constantly stare at the screen to do things. So that causes other challenges of fatigue, staring at the computer screen. And I don't necessarily always have a big monitor to do that in. So trying to avoid staring at a screen all day, I wanted to make myself more productive. So I thought these glasses with the AI captioning would be fantastic. And I thought it would be a game changer. I'm not saying that we won't have interpreters anymore. And of course, you still need to have interpreters like we're using them right now in person. So I'm using the glasses with captioning. However, I'm struggling with security issues. My hope is that one day we can control the data source of the captioning. Right now, because of data sensitivity, customers don't want me to use them because they're not sure what happens with that caption data and where that's going. So my hope is one day I can use that with my clients and not be concerned about where that data is going for security reasons.
Wow. So the technology exists in order to provide this great help, but it doesn't exist in a way that is secure, locked down from access control. Everyone can know where the data is going. So when you're working with very sensitive information,
Exactly.
so it then removes that tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's tough. I really want to use them so much, but I have to wait. I can't use them yet.
Well, Chris, I definitely have enjoyed having you on the show. I have learned several things just in the time we've been chatting. This has been a very interesting conversation. I think the audience will enjoy it. For folks that are watching the video that want to catch up with you and learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you online?
Easy to find me on LinkedIn. And you can contact me, Chris, Khanoyan. And you can find me on LinkedIn under that name and on GitHub.
I just want to say, Chris, thank you again. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Created by the team at buoyant.io.